Oh, Canada. Awesome. Pretty good looking flag, I gotta say. Yet again, the president is sowing uncertainty and chaos, attempting to undermine our economy by implementing tariffs and then quickly pulling them off. He has realized what we told him from the beginning, which is that these tariffs hurt Americans. They hurt American companies. They hurt American workers. They hurt American families. And what's also hurting is the uncertainty that the continued threat and removal of tariffs has on our country here in Canada. My message for the Prime Minister, for my colleagues across the country, and it's one I'm sure they want to deliver to me too, is stand strong. We are not going to accept these continual threats, this continued uncertainty. We're going to stand up for Canadians. This is unacceptable. And we're going to ensure that the Americans understand how pissed off we are, how unified we are, how committed we are to working as a country to stand up for each other and our own independence on our own 2 feet. And I say we don't let up until the president takes the threat off the table.
Hey guys, welcome back, or if you're new here, welcome. My name is Lumi, and today we're going to be looking at more of just the general economy and the state of the world right now, especially with the tariffs. So, I don't know if you guys heard, but recently President Trump has pushed some pretty aggressive policies lately, specifically targeted towards Canada and Mexico. I think it's been worse with Canada, and it's very strange. I mean, we're living in really strange times right now, and it feels like people, like when I talk to friends and family about this stuff, it feels like I don't know, it's like people don't want to admit that we're going through something like this. Like I was talking to my dad the other day, and he didn't even want to talk about the economy. Usually we're talking about stuff like this and like world politics and whatever, but he was just so, I guess, it's hard to see. It's hard to see all your like investments and your like livelihood, all your savings, that's all tied up in this stuff, just plummet. It's not easy. And I personally have been watching all my hard-earned savings go down. All the progress we've made in the past few years I wouldn't say past few years. I'd say like the past 6 months, I think. Yeah, all the gains we made in the past 6 months have been pretty much wiped out, because of all these aggressive new policies. But yeah, no, it's pretty crazy with the situation in Canada. So first it was what, 25% tariffs? Now it's like 125% tariffs. Like he put these tariffs on Canada, and it's like almost like a threat or like a bullying tactic. I don't know. I don't know what the ultimate goal is here. Some people say that he wants Canada to join the U.S., become like the 51st state, which would be crazy. I don't even know how that would work. Would the whole thing become a state, or would we like cut it up into little bits and pieces? Because Canada's pretty large, and I think like the east and west coast is vastly different from each other. I don't know. I'm not terribly familiar with how Canada works, but yeah, that'd be so crazy to see. And like I have friends from Canada, so like oftentimes they'll say it could be a good thing because I think Canada's economy is kind of not the greatest right now, so this really puts a lot of pressure on them. These tariffs. So I mean, who knows? It might get to a point where the people just say, screw it, let's do it, and then if the people put pressure on their own government, then you might start to see some results. But until then, it seems like Canada's just gonna, fire back with what they've got. I think they put tariffs on us, and they made their border. I think they closed their border or made it a lot harder for Americans to passage freely across the border. So like any trucks going through, like to and from the U.S., are gonna have a much harder time getting through. So we're gonna see this trickle down. It once it affects the pockets of the wealthy and the elite, we're gonna see like what ends up happening. But until then, it's gonna be a lot of just stuff you hear in the news, um, and yeah, it's gonna be a lot of just tit for tat, I think. But yeah, let's continue here and see what else we got.
If you're watching the stock market right now, you might feel like you were on a theme park roller coaster ride. And you are not alone, because investors, they are strapped in right next to you right now on this ride. So the US major indexes, all three, they opened lower this morning. And that was after a rough week on Wall Street already. They tried to claw back into the green, but they've since taken another nosedive. Things, though, they are changing by the second here. Now, what's driving this? Tariff turmoil is a big one. The U.S. announced 25% tariffs on goods coming into the U.S. from Mexico and Canada. That happened earlier this week, as well as an additional 10% on goods coming from China. Now, since then, the White House has announced exemptions on certain areas and goods when it comes to Mexico and Canada, but only until April 2nd. That's when the White House plans to announce sweeping tariffs on countries that levy import taxes on the U.S. Now, beyond potentially higher costs for businesses, prices for consumers, and incentive to move manufacturing here, the markets are reacting negatively because investors hate uncertainty. There has been so much back and forth on when are tariffs going into effect, are they going into effect, what countries are affected. That's very difficult for investors to make informed trades on sectors or stocks when things are changing by the minute. The other thing driving market losses is a potential softening in the labor market. We got new data showing layoffs spiked to their highest level since summer 2020 in February. All in all, until there's more clarity on where the economy is going, we could be in for a bumpy ride on Wall Street.
Yeah, this is another thing. It's crazy to see how we're being so aggressive towards some of our closest neighbors, specifically Canada and Mexico. But yet, when it comes to China and Russia, we're kind of just like playing it cool. We're only, I think he really hasn't messed with Russia too much yet. And with China, we put 10% tariffs on them, just like a little bit. That's like almost nothing compared to what we did to Canada and Mexico. So, and I heard there's a reason for this. There's like a tactic he's doing that people have noticed. There's my dad was telling me about this. There's like this strategy that was employed by ancient Greece, I think, where way back when, when they were the superpower or one of the superpowers of the world, there was this tiny island that they were trying to take over, and they basically gave them an ultimatum that, you can either join us or surrender, and we'll take you by force, right? And they didn't surrender, so we ended up taking them by force. Or they did. They ended up taking. I'm talking like we're ancient Greece here, but no. They ended up taking them by force, and the rest of the world got really pissed off. And it was kind of like the beginning of the end for Greece. And it just did not. It wasn't a good look in the international, in the eyes of the rest of the world, right? So people have like drawn some parallels from that case to what we're seeing now in the U.S. Like it feels like the U.S. has kind of been imploding or deteriorating for the last 20, 25 years. And yeah, no, it's it's getting pretty interesting. They say, what is it? every great civilization only lasts like 250 years. Like that's their golden age, and then it's just downhill from there. So, and America's around that age, right? So, who knows? I mean, we might just be going through a rough patch right now, but who knows? We might end up better than before if we get through this, or worse. Nothing's set in stone. Um, I hate to sound like a pessimist, but I've told you guys before, I'm a realist. Like I try to keep an optimistic attitude about things where I can, but when it comes to things like this and what I'm seeing, I can't help but be like, okay, these are the facts, right? And you have to take that as it is, right? You can't. The facts are facts, and there's no getting around that. So, I mean, interpret it how you like, but at the end of the day, like it's the truth, and we have to just take it as it is, right?
You can see that for a long period of time, we had not a lot of movement on tariffs. And then Trump came in, and tariffs are a beautiful thing. We got the whole speech back then. But he actually did limit a lot what he did to a few products, a few countries. And of course, remember that he negotiated the USMCA, the new so-called free trade agreement between Canada and Mexico, which he's now, in effect, ripped up. And then Biden actually brought them down a bit. And these new tariffs on China, on Mexico, and on Canada have brought our average tariff rate to over 10%. And just to put that in perspective, this is the highest tariff rate we have had since World War II. The whole history of post-World War II was bringing tariffs down, bringing countries together, making them economically more integrated, as a means also of having more peace and less likelihood that one of them would attack another. And now Trump has gone the other way. He's doing this against the backdrop that is not ideal. Inflation, we can debate whose fault inflation is. He certainly took a shot at Biden last night. But inflation has come down, but it's kind of stuck around 3%. And the Fed's target is 4%. And this has implications for interest rates. It will be very hard for the Fed to cut interest rates further with inflation stuck around 3% and even going up a little bit. Meanwhile, and more significantly, inflation expectations play a big role in what actually happens. What people project is going to happen and they behave on the basis of what they think is going to happen can actually become a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Right now, consumers are expecting 4.3% inflation, and with a couple of exceptions, that's the highest it's been since in the post-COVID period. And tariffs have played a big role in this. It has penetrated the public consciousness that tariffs are inflationary, and they are now looking at more inflation, which simply makes the Fed's job harder.
Yeah, he's definitely got a point with how this whole thing has been kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, which I find pretty interesting. It's almost like human nature to, talk about things like this, to predict things like this, and then ultimately either they happen because we're just talking about it, we're expecting it to happen, right? And in the end, it happens, right? Like with inflation, everyone was saying, oh, this is going to cause inflation post-COVID, right? With everything we were doing then. And eventually, yeah, it did happen. I don't think it was as bad as people expected. Like I think the Fed did an okay job with the soft landing, right? They were pretty aggressive with the interest rates and what they were pushing, right? But now with these tariffs, I think that's throwing a huge wrench in the whole plan and the whole I guess timeline of this thing, getting inflation under control. Because with these tariffs now, it's making this whole thing a lot more complicated. But yeah, I mean, gosh, we'll see. We'll see what happens in this month. March is going to be interesting. I, for one, I'm not, again, this is not financial advice. I'm just going to hold on gonna ride out the roller coaster. This is not my first rodeo, right? Like, I just wish I had a job and I wish I was making some income so I could, buy. This is basically like I see it personally as like a discount, right? You hear a lot of people, a lot of investors say, "Oh, buy the dip," right? Because in the grand scheme of things, everything always goes up, right? And if it doesn't, I think we have bigger problems on our hands. Like, if the overall stock market just goes down, um, we're probably looking at like World War III or some kind of apocalyptic scenario, right? But yeah, me for one, I'm just gonna ride this out. I'm not gonna try and freak out too much. When you let emotions drive your, um, when you let emotions just take control, I guess, of your decision making, that is when mistakes get made. But if you play it cool, if you just take a step back, look at the grand scheme of things, and let it take its course, you know, oftentimes that's usually the best thing to do. Um, if I could give you guys an example, the dot-com bubble, for example, my parents went through that, and they had a bunch of stock in like Google and Amazon, all the big dot-com stocks in the I think 90s, early 2000s, and then the whole thing came crashing down, and they sold like a really big chunk. And if they had just kept their cool and held on to that stuff, I mean, my family probably would have been millionaires, like it's really that's just how it is. And I'll say this about myself, like um, I was heavily invested in crypto in like the early days, but I sold a big chunk and uh, I used that capital. I should have just reinvested. I reinvested like a small chunk of it, but I used a good majority of that capital to, buy things, right? And I would have had more money in the long run if I just held. You know, I hear it time and time again. If you just hang on, if you just hold, oftentimes in the long run, you will be better off. But again, everyone's situation is different. Like, obviously, if you need the money now, that's a different story. If you're living, hand to mouth, that's a different story. And if you have like a family, like everyone's appetite for risk or their pain tolerance is different, right? So like if you support a family and you need the money now, like then that's different from someone who is, I don't know, single and just works at one job and they support themselves. Like obviously your pain tolerances are going to be different. But yeah, I just think in the long run, if you just hang on, hold on, things will usually just work themselves out. They'll iron themselves out. So just keep that in mind, I guess. But anyway, guys, I'm done rambling here. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave me a like. If you dislike it, dislike it. Let me know in the comments what you think. Where do you think we're heading with this? Do you think Trump's going to implement more tariffs? Or do you think, Canada will bend to what Trump wants? Do you think Mexico will do what he wants? Let me know in the comments below. And always, if you enjoyed, please consider subscribing. It helps me and the channel grow and go a long way. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed again, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later.